Okay, so diving right in here, we do a audio and a video recording. We'll end up doing, we'll take about an hour, and we will do really conversational kind of approach. We have questions, but not we don't have like a set beforehand or anything like that. What we'll do is I'll introduce myself. Michael will introduce himself, and then I'll allow you to introduce yourself. And we have always found that as soon as you get your introduction going, then that just opens the floodgates, and we have a conversation from there on out, depending on what you talk about. Our audience is technical, figure 30 to 40 somethings. They've been doing technology for a little bit, maybe not a whole lot, but also are driven to be, they're builders and things of that nature. So they're going to have an entrepreneurial bent. If usually they're developers, but they also have a side hustle or maybe a company that they're building as they're going through this. And that's about it. We'll end up splitting it into 2 episodes, about 20, 25 minutes apiece. But as far as this recording is concerned, we're going to go all the way through the recording. When we're done, we'll have I'll do a close to the audio part. But then if you'll hang on, we'll do what we call a bonus for the video, where we'll basically ask you like a challenge that maybe you have for everybody or a parting thought that you have for our audience. And then we'll wrap it up and we'll be good. Any questions? Okay.
No. Now I'm stressed, but okay.
All right. So, whoops. Let me make sure I got everything going here. Got a little water there. All right. Make sure I got everything behind me good. We are good. So, we will dive in with 3, 2, 1. Well, hello and welcome back. We are continuing our season of building better developers, but this actual season is getting unstuck, moving forward momentum, all the important things that you need, particularly if it's the start of a year, which it more or less is. I guess we're solidly the end of the first quarter at this point, but that's where this season started. This is Developreneur Podcast, Building Better Developers. I am Rob Broadhead, one of the founders of Developreneur, also the founder of RB Consulting, where we help you essentially get unstuck. If you're about to jump into a big project, you're trying to figure out what to do with all this AI stuff, we're going to say, hold on a second, let's figure out where we are before we dive into whatever this maybe very expensive project is going to be. You can see a lot of stats out there where everybody expects all these AI initiatives to fail and cost a lot of money. So let's make sure that we actually start in a good spot before we do so. Brings me to good thing and bad thing. Good thing is finally, I've been stuck in rain and storms like too many people for too long this year. It just seems like the year of the storms and not a lot of sunlight. This weekend, we got a lot of sunlight. It was great. Finally was able to get a little like that, vitamin D and all that kind of other good stuff, that the healthy things that come when you sit out there and actually get a little sunlight into your life. The downside is that now the place that I'm finally able to enjoy a little bit, I'm going to be leaving in a couple of days, so I'm not going to get the full enjoyment that I was going to. The good news, the better news, is you will get the full enjoyment of listening to Michael as he introduces himself.
Hey everyone, my name is Michael Malash. I'm one of the co-founders of Building Better Developers, also known as Developreneur. I'm also the founder of Envision QA, where we create reliable, tailored software that helps you work smarter, scale faster, and stay in control. Good thing and bad thing, similar to Rob, we're still in the winter here in Tennessee. We had a wonderful weekend. It actually got up to almost 80 degrees on Sunday. But then, of course, over the evening, we dropped down to 33 degrees. So that was the bad thing. I actually woke up to snow Monday morning where I was out in shorts doing yard work all day Sunday. So typical Tennessee weather, you throw a rock, next thing you know, it's another season.
Yes, that is the joy of Tennessee, is that the weather can change sometimes within minutes. Another joy we have today, another good thing, is we have a guest once again that we will be speaking with, do another interview episode, and we will be speaking with Adam today. If you would go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hello, my name is Adam. I'm working in IT for probably too long, almost 20 years. I've been developer, platform architect, cloud engineer, you name it. And some time ago, I started collecting my knowledge and publishing both blog and books about this. I really like sharing what I learned, especially through the scope of failure patterns rather than another success story. And I hope I would be able to share something. The best would be insightful, but let's see if I manage.
Well, I think we dive right into the insightful because this is you have according to your material, you are I guess a self-declared BS detector of some sort for the digital age. And given your experience, I think that's like, you've lived through this. I've been around for a few years as well. And it's like, I think we see cycles, we see trends, we see every few years there's another silver bullet, and there's like, this is the thing that's going to change the world, and everybody's going to be happy about it, and everybody's going to just live happily ever after. And then a couple years later, because it doesn't happen, we get that again. So I'm going to dive right in. Like, how has this latest phase of the AI craze, which this rise of AI, particularly going back just a little bit before it became, I guess, this latest buzz, but where you started the low code and no code and now getting into AI, is like, how do you, just from a technologist, from somebody who's been developing for a long time, how do you see that? How do you see that going? How do you see that one working out?
Well, that's an interesting question, because from one perspective, this is a revolution. This does bring a lot of new capabilities and tools. But at the same time, I see it very similar to what we've seen during end of 20th century, so dot-com bubble, when suddenly everything would be solved, and everything that had .com in the name would be a next big thing. How it ended, and let me remind you, pets.com or other brilliant ideas like that. Something like that happens now, and there is also an aspect of AI washing. But at the same time, let's be clear, during dot-com bubble, giants like Amazon and Google were created. So the technology continued, the technology grew. It did create new giants. It did revolutionize the way we think and work nowadays. But a lot of people have to pay a price for it. Similarly, that's literally, I'm seeing so many parallels now that it is incredible to me that a lot of people don't know.
Do you see, so with some of those parallels, do you see maybe where there's some things that particularly right now that companies can look at, particularly those that are trying to dive into something, that are markers of that success? I would say that it's probably likely obvious that there's going to be another Amazon or another Google or something like that will come out of this phase of technology. It could be somebody we know, it could be more of Google or more Microsoft or somebody like that, or it could be OpenAI or whoever it is. There could be somebody we've not even heard of yet. Is there something that you see as a marker of those that are successful, or do you see it more as does it feel more like it's just sort of the right time, the right place, and a lot of luck? Or what would you recommend somebody that's thinking about something like this? How do they try to ensure they're going to be around in a few years?
So that actually touches a little bit why I decided to write and focus on my narration through the failure, because the thing is that success is always, to a certain extent, luck. It's easy to say another success story, to say just mimic whatever, I don't know, Bezos, Zuckerberg, Altman, or whoever you want to think of did, and you will be successful. But besides a lot of talent and, of course, hard work, there was an aspect of luck, circumstances, and so on. So basically, we have classic survivorship bias, and it's not easy to replicate. But on the other hand, the mistakes that other companies or company startups that failed did, those are easy to replicate. We don't need to try to replicate them. If we don't learn from them, we will experience. So instead of looking at I don't know, whatever I don't know, OpenAI or other Anthropic did to be successful, assume they, of course, I would suggest to look at what other companies did and weren't successful. Yeah, when we're talking at pets.com, that's a maybe nice example, sorry for kicking if whoever was involved in that project 25 years ago, but they just thought that taking one solution, one problem to totally new area and claiming that it would be successful just because it uses new technology wasn't enough. And similar pattern is visible with AI. In many companies, you can see this trend of we need to use AI. In my first book, which is pure satire on IT industry, I even wrote a place, a small comic like, "What do we want AI? When do we want it? Yesterday? What should it do? We don't know." And this is kind of approach. Just slap AI on everything and maybe figure out what it will be, what it will do for us later. And I've seen that all, even in daily work, when suddenly some project, some problem was solved. Let's use AI because it's more modern, more up to date. While my answer, when I saw the solution, I said, yeah, you could do this with a simple bash script that you would write in 2 hours. And instead of gazillion tokens that you will pay for, you would use, I don't know, half the CPU core or something like that. So that's something to look at. Not how to replicate a success, but how to avoid or protect yourself from repeating the mistake.
Yeah, I think that's something that's we see a lot is that where people they lose focus on the why. They're not really solving a problem; they're just using a tool, and it's as they say, it's a solution looking for a problem. They're trying to find an excuse to use it. Now, there is some level of that though. Is like how do you see the research side of, for example, like using an AI? Because there is, I think with every time we have this new technology, there's probably one or two problems that we look at and we can say, yes, that's what we've been waiting for to solve that problem. But there's almost always things that come out of, there's new stuff that comes out of that technology where suddenly there are maybe even problems we didn't know we wanted to solve. Like I'll give Amazon as a brief example, is that we've always had mail and delivery and stuff like that. And Amazon started as just books, but then somewhere along the way, they're now a couple different companies. But one of the big things people think about with Amazon is they have Amazon boxes that just show up at your door, and this instantaneous delivery that really, I don't think anybody was clamoring for. Nobody was looking for it before. Everybody now that people are like, this is great, more or less, but it's not like people were crying for it. So how do you see that? How do you see an approach with, like, let's say AI, that maybe even how you would approach it to figure out how can I get to use this tool and get comfortable enough with it so that it will trigger where there's some problems that I see, oh, here's a problem that I can solve with the tool.
So first of all, look, I would say, don't say, I want to use AI, what problems can I solve? It is, what problems do you see in your day-to-day basis, in your professional experience, personal experience, or whatnot, and then think if you can use AI to solve. So it's a concept of finding your blue ocean. There's very common, the biggest success stories actually quite often are not about being super creative, about being better than competition. It's about finding their blue ocean, their own niche that they could solve. Would it use AI? I don't know. Maybe to speed up development, for instance. As far as I wouldn't encourage using AI and famous vibe coding to build the real production system. It would be great for validating ideas. In startup phase, it is very important to fail fast, to validate against the market. That could speed up. Would the solution use AI? Yes, actually. As long as it solves a real problem for you or somebody you know. And let's be clear, best entrepreneurs in history find the problems and that people don't even know they have. Like you mentioned, Amazon. Steve Jobs was great at it. He was just selling the value. Let's be clear, iPod was nothing revolutionary from technological perspective. There were already some Chinese competition. There was Microsoft Zoom, if I remember correctly. Creative had something. Everything worked. What Jobs did was he named the problem and solved and provided the solution. Instead of 500 megabytes or gigabytes, I don't know, I think it was 64 gigabytes, but correct me if I'm wrong. He said 1,000 songs. This was the value that just needed to be.
Yeah, so that's an interesting comparison because innovation is really the driving factor, right? You know, it's like what essentially becomes like the 1%, like those Amazons, those Googles. They find that niche or they find that innovation that everyone can use. The problem is not every application or every business can service everyone, right? That's not the goal. If you try to service everyone, you're in this big ocean of competition. So really for a lot of businesses, they have to kind of narrow their focus to become the best at what they do. Essentially, you know, what is your why? What are you trying to solve? It's interesting your comparison back to pets.com and the transition of technology and that. I want to circle back around to that for a moment. So given like the rise of cloud computing, you know, everything went to the cloud and then companies were quickly like, oh, we got to be in the cloud. Now it's like, okay, now everything's AI. It's like, hey, we got to use AI. Except I see a difference here from the .com, the cloud, software as a service to AI, where companies are now like throwing everything at AI. It's like, here, everything should be using AI. Whereas with the cloud, they spend a little more time investigating, researching, building their architectures in the cloud. With AI, it seems companies are just giving their engineers the tools and say, here, go play, go figure this out. Do you see or do you have a recommendation for how companies should be applying this or should be figuring out their move to AI better? Yes, I understand, you know, they need to figure out their why, but is there a better way to incorporate AI into their current models to seamlessly integrate it instead of just kind of like, let's throw everything at it and figure out how it works?
Well, I'm kind of by experience and belief platform engineer. So in platform engineering, I will skip for a moment entirely conversation about AI. We have various deployment paths. You have blue-green deployments, you have canary deployments, and so on. And the most common nowadays in big organizations and sensible is somehow automated canary deployment. For whoever doesn't know that, explain what I mean. We do not move everything to the new version right away as a big bang change. We deploy a new version simultaneously and send I don't know, 1%, 5% traffic to the new version to verify that it still works. Once it works, once we verify manually or automatically, usually automatically with some metrics, then we send, I don't know, 20%, 50%, and finally, and everything. My question would be why we cannot do the same approach in AI? You're saying let's throw that companies go with, let's throw everything at AI and see how it works. Do not try to throw everything in the new area. Find, I don't know, one process that you could think you could improve and see if it works. Maybe if it works, great, go with the next one. If not, go back. If you revolutionize entire organization, well, maybe you will win, maybe you will not. Probability that you will not is, according looking at the research, recent research, is a bit higher than that you will be a winner.
Oh, thank you. Along those lines, though, I love that approach. And I've worked with some companies that have taken that approach where they started simple, like, hey, we have this constant report that people have to put together. Let's try to automate that. And ironically, it took them 6 months to perfect that. But given when they started, AI wasn't quite where it is today. So that's one of the challenges I think companies are running into, is the fact that the technology is moving very fast, right? It's like what we're using AI today in 6 months may be a totally different model that you're working with, and it may be faster. It may actually solve the problem you're working with. With these challenges, and like you said before, the cost and trying to roll things out in stages, is this one of those times where going slow may be prudent but detrimental to staying competitive in your market?
Well, define competitive. That's the first thing, because those companies that did 6 months instead of 6 weeks, let's be clear, it's not that they just introduced and perfected solution. They built the know-how how to use this solution, and then in the meantime, the models, as you said, got better. But the most important, they did have sandbox to learn the solution without risking, and maybe the next process that they would pick instead of 6 months would take, I don't know, 3 months or even couple days instead of another couple weeks, let's say. And that brings me to another interesting historical example, sorry for jumping, but at the beginning of 1990s, I'm not that old, that's a historical knowledge, there was something interesting phenomena called productivity paradox. So basically, when the computers entered the offices, companies worldwide, especially in US, poured billions of dollars into computers, not internet, but just office tools like it wasn't called Microsoft Office, but then it was more Lotus, I think. But basically, word processor, presentations, and stuff. And everybody expected that there would be productivity boost. And if you look at statistics, what happened was there was a drastic increase on spending on the IT. There was drastic spending on hardware. The companies providing this hardware were earning a lot. But if you looked at the productivity of the enterprises, it's not visible. In the 1980s or beginning of 1990s, there's nothing. What the companies needed to do was to establish totally new processes, organization culture, to incorporate this improvement before the gain actually materialized. AI is similar. AI revolutionizes everything we do. Suddenly, for instance, from development perspective, software creation, we do not create. Our problem is no longer creating the coding the solution. It is verifying what the AI creates for us in the organization. You can like it or not, but the shift towards verification is visible everywhere. But that means that we need to establish those new processes, new organization, before we really reap the benefits. Maybe those 6 months that you mentioned was exactly what was needed for the organization in the long term.
Interesting. So we've talked about that in the past, about your why, developing your processes and procedures, talking about, defining your requirements and that. For those of our listeners, what is your recommendation in this new era with your history that you've looked at? What is your best practices or your vision for how an organization or an individual could go about incorporating AI into their flow correctly so that they're not overwhelmed, they're not wasting money, they're not, bleeding those tokens, so to speak?
Well, I would say always learn the tool first. but not how to write a prompt or agent, but understand the tool, what are the limitations, what are the benefits, what it was designed for before you incorporate it. So basically listen to creators of the tool, not for marketers that are selling that tool to you. As for details of the process, it's really hard for me to answer, and I won't be pretending that I know all the answers. Sorry.
I think that's an interesting point. And we found this out years ago. There was back when there was another boom of tools. There were these they're called case tools at the time and things like that, which eventually has become low code and no code. And it was interesting as the people that had built the tools had something in mind, and then the marketing people had something completely different in mind. We were actually utilizing the tool and had a third thing in mind. It was amazing how often we had a conversation with their support, and they would say, "Oh wow, we never thought of the tool doing that." And so I think that's a really key point, and maybe that goes back even to Michael's discussion. The mention of innovation is that maybe that's what we should be looking at. Is really, let's use a tool without the preconceived notion that either maybe even that the builder or the marketing people give us, and instead just say, okay, here's a hammer, what can I do with it? Because I think that maybe is where we're going to find innovation and new ways to use something that is maybe something nobody had thought of before. Because obviously, if the marketing people are saying this is what it's good for, then somebody's already thought of it. They've already tried to find a problem. The innovation is going to come when you veer away from that.
Yeah, but let me be clear. I'm not saying don't look for different applications of the tool. The creativity, the genius comes from finding those new applications of tools, and that's awesome. Let's be clear. Another example, Slack was was literally created as a tool that wasn't designed as an enterprise distraction as a service that it is right now. It was internal tool for, I think it was some game studio that wanted some internal tool, and then they found out that it was better than the product that they were working. Yes, look for those solutions, and just like people are genius, people creativity is infinite in terms of finding the ways to break the systems or solutions that we build for them. The same way people's creativity is infinite in terms of finding new ways to use some. That's totally true, and I would strongly encourage for this creativity. That's one thing. However, another thing is to understand the tool and its limitations. So basically, do not read this was designed for one ABC. It's more about us creators what the tool can do and then figure out. So yes, let's use Hammer. Yes, it's a great tool. You can find a lot of user applications of it, but you need to know that it's not the sharpest tool ever. If you try to use hammer instead of screwdriver, or I don't know, a scalpel to remove an appendix, probably not the best idea. And here, marketers, I'm using this in a little bit negative fashion as an archetype of marketer, not everybody. They are great at first highlighting benefits, then even exaggerating them, but omitting at best or lying about the limitation. So basically, as a result, you start to look for applications without an understanding of the tool. So if we look at, for instance, AI, large language models, people believe that they could do, I don't know, vibe coding or try to write entire books for it. No, they cannot. They are great in generating text, be it natural text or code, but they are not good at keeping the structure required for writing a book or building a software. That's totally different discipline. If you understand that, they can speed up your productivity as a developer. It will generate skeleton of the application, implement some simple methods of even entire classes for you. But the entire architecture of the software, entire testing process of the software is something that you still need to do. You cannot automate it, at least with the current level of AI tools. The same with, I don't know, writing. Maybe it could come up with some ideas, maybe it could drop some nicer sounding words like a ghostwriter would do, but it will not replace the author that would architect entire storytelling or even redacting work at the end.
And that actually goes back to all that really follows up well with your earlier first to market versus like, and the rush to market or the like, if you want to be competitive, it's another reason why it's just being fast is not necessarily going to do it. If you want to be competitive, a lot of it comes back to like solving the right problem and solving it in the right way. So I think that was a great way to sort of circle back and reinforce what you mentioned earlier. And that is where we're going to pause this episode, or actually we're going to pause this conversation, this episode. We're actually going to wrap this one up. Don't fear, we will be back. We will be speaking with Adam some more. I apologize if you're not as technical. This is definitely what developers do when they start, especially us old developers. Instead of like the people that used to sit on the porch and talk about old war stories, we talk about our technology war stories. And the neat thing is we've been through multiple generations of them at this point, because it seems like technology like cycles every, 5 to 7 years. So if you're in there 20 or 30 years, you have multiple cycles and you have a lot that you can talk about, a lot of callbacks to earlier cycles, earlier technologies, and things of that nature. Adam does a great job jumping back 35 years now, basically, maybe a little, late 80s and 90s. We're talking almost 40 years ago. But we're going to continue in the next episode. So you can rest your arm, shake out those muscles and stuff like that, and be ready for taking notes the next episode. Till then, go out there and have yourself a great day, a great week, and we will talk to you next time.